This time last year, I was studying for my GCSE exams. I was feeling overwhelmed, anxious, and honestly, just stressed out. I felt like I was drowning in work, and in hindsight, it honestly wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. So if you're feeling the exact same way, I promise you, you're going to get through this. I'm starting off this series with history, and today I'm going to be telling you exactly what I did to get a strong 9. This video is going to be split into 3 parts. Firstly, I'm going to talk about how I made my notes. Secondly, how to answer specific exam style questions. And thirdly, just some general exam tips. So firstly, I think the most core and essential part of how I did well in history was the way in which I made my notes. So for every single unit that we did, I had 3 separate documents. Firstly, I had my main notes doc, and my teacher was very kind to give us templates for this. So we had 2 columns, one for syllabus statements and the other column was for writing notes. I will link an example template in the description below, but essentially I just went through the textbook and also went through my class notes and put in everything in the relevant section. Now for the second way, which in my opinion was the most helpful. So in my GCSE exam, I did edexcel history, and they always had an 8-mark question that was explain 2 effects of X, or for the China unit, explain 2 causes of X. So my friend and I went through the entire syllabus and we turned every syllabus point into an effects question. So for example, in the civil rights unit, if one point was Malcolm X and Black Power, then we could turn it into explain 2 effects of Black Power on the civil rights movement. And then we would answer them. So we ended up with a really long document with all of the effects. And let me tell you, that was so helpful because when we came to writing the exam, we'd already practiced the 8-mark question, which was really helpful. The final way I made notes was I used timelines, and this just really helped me with key dates. So this would help me score in the essay and also the effects part, where I could add in my own information and show the examiner that I really knew what I was talking about. Now on to the second part. So in edexcel, there are 3 questions. The first one is, what impression does the author give about X? And you're given a very short source and then you just answer the question. So this question is worth 6 marks, and the way I approach it is I write 1 paragraph, and immediately I always write LTE on the source so that I always make sure I look for language, tone, and evidence. So there are 2 ways in which I start off my answer. The first being, the author gives the impression that X was significant or not significant. And secondly, the author gives a negative or positive impression of X, portraying him or her as Y. That immediately answers the question, and then following that, I will back it up with evidence from the text. So I will pick out specific words or phrases that support my argument. So I would use phrases like, the author uses language like X and Y showing Z. Then I would refer to the tone and say something along the lines of, the author's tone is cynical or critical or one of praise, shown by the phrase X. And then finally, I would add in, however, the author does not mention X suggesting Y. So for example, if the author specifically leaves out an event which could completely change your opinion of a person, then you could include that there. And this would be a good way to show the examiner that you have knowledge outside the source. The next question is, explain 2 effects or causes of X. Now I always structure this with 2 paragraphs, 1 for each effect or cause, and I would always start with, 1 effect of X is Y, and the second paragraph would start with, another effect of X is Z. Make sure you explain each effect with statistics or key dates, and again, this shows that you're bringing in your own knowledge and you're demonstrating to the examiner that you know what you're talking about. If you're doing the unit, the Cold War, then most of the time, the answer to the effects question is either increased tensions or decreased tensions between superpower relations, and if that's the case, it might be hard to find another effect. So if that's the case, then try and find a long-term and then a short-term effect of that, and then explain them and make sure that they are very different so that you can still get the maximum amount of marks for that question. Finally, the essay question. This question is worth 16 marks, so make sure that you leave enough time to answer this question. So the way I structure this is I always have 5 paragraphs. 1 for the intro, 3 main body texts. The first 2 will always be given in the question, and then the third one you have to think of on your own, and then finally I'll have a conclusion summing up everything. So the way they ask these questions is they have a statement and then they say, how far do you agree? So the way I start these essays is I write In the years 1954 to 64, or whatever year it is, there were many causes of X, including the 2 points they give you and one of your own, and then I strongly agree or disagree. I strongly urge you not to use I moderately agree or I agree to a moderate extent, because in an exam situation, it's just easier to have a very clear cut and a strong view, because then the examiner won't get confused as to what you're arguing. Other than all of the question types I just mentioned, there's also one paper called the investigation, and for this paper I did Vietnam. So for this unit and this unit only, they have source-based questions, and they always ask you to compare the different sources, which comes much more naturally to me because it's essentially like writing an English literature essay. So my biggest tip for these types of questions is to always mention the source explicitly in your answer. So say something like, source A mentions X, however, source B does not, implying that Y. Also, don't be afraid to quote the specific sources, but with that being said, don't copy paragraphs. A rule of thumb is to quote 5 words from the source. Make sure you don't write a few sentences out, because there is no way you'll be able to fully analyze that. And if you're just lifting so much from the source, it shows the examiner that you don't really understand the material. You should also explain and elaborate on every single quote that you have. And when the question specifies that you need to provide your own information, don't be afraid to say, apart from the sources, there's also X, Y, and Z, or from my own knowledge, we also know that X, Y, and Z, which provides a different perspective, implying that blah, blah, blah. To add to that, I'm pretty sure in the mark scheme, they also say that if you don't add in your own knowledge, then you can't get into the top grade boundary. So please don't forget to do that. Now on to the last section, which is just exam tips in general. So I'm going to be talking you through the exact timings, because timing is key in this exam. You do not have a second to waste. So this is the rundown of what I like to do. So in the edexcel exam, you have 2 units per paper. So you have an hour and a half, which means that you have 45 minutes per section. So I personally spend 6 to 7 minutes on the first question, 8 minutes on the second question. So then I have around 30 minutes to answer the essay question. Before I begin, I always read through all 3 questions before starting, so that way my brain is already thinking about the essay question before I start. When I do get to the essay question, my biggest piece of advice would be don't jump in blindly and try to answer the question straight away. Think about it for a bit, jot down a few words. What I usually do is jot down specific statistics or key dates that I have in mind relating to the question, and then I also write down the 3rd point that I want to include and number the importance of the 3 points that I have, so that the first point I write about is always the most important. Finally, you always have to be extremely calm in history exams, and I know that's easier said than done. I've been flustered so many times in my history exams, and I think the key is just to do a lot of time practice. Give yourself less time than you would in the actual exam, so that when you're under exam pressure and you're a little bit nervous, you can calm yourself down a bit because you've done it loads of times before. Anyways, I really hope that helped. History is a really tough subject, and there's so much that you want to say and so little time to say it in. So yeah, I really hope that helped. Let me know how your revision's going in the comments below, and subscribe if you want to see more GCSE and study content. Anyways, I really hope that your exams go smoothly, and honestly, just do the best that you can, because that's all anyone can ask of you. I hope that you guys have a productive day, and hopefully I will see you in my next video. Bye!